Hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer Briggs, licensed acupuncturist here at Briggs Health, LLC in Coos Bay, Oregon. And today I am interviewing Christina Stapke, integrative and functional dietitian. She lives and works in Seattle. And I wanted to do this interview because of the program that I've been working on. Right now, I'm calling it Make the Most of Your Menu. And it is a program that is designed to help people really understand the connection between what they're eating and their health on a day-to-day basis. So today I wanted to talk to Christina because she has a set of tools that she uses with her patients that really kind of it goes along well with the program that I've been doing and gives people an option for kind of the next step with regard to their health and their diet. So, Christina, can you tell us a little bit about what functional medicine is and tell us a little bit about your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. And it sounds like the program that you've created sounds really awesome and super important. So really excited that you're doing that for your patients. So yeah, essentially what functional medicine is, to kind of super simplify it is addressing the root causes of any kind of illness or disease or health issue. And kind of how we address those root causes is by making sure, recommendations are hyper individualized, really focusing on prioritizing the patient's goals, and also, of course, using the most up-to-date science and evidence that we have to kind of tailor those recommendations. And so kind of under that umbrella of functional medicine is functional nutrition, which is kind of really my wheelhouse. And essentially what we work on there is we, of course, talk about nutrition and exercise, but we also look into things like, how your genetics can impact, what diet or what food choices might be best for you, your gut health. We take a look at toxin exposure and kind of how that affects your body. And then, of course, we work on other lifestyle things like sleep, stress management, and all of that. And of course, movement. And I think I mentioned that earlier. So that's essentially kind of what we work on to get someone to really their best state of health. And so, yeah, so my practice is based in Seattle. However, I do have the flexibility to see clients throughout the US and set up in about 6 different states right now. And so, yeah, it's been really fun to be able to reach people kind of throughout the US and really work on a lot of this stuff with them. And essentially, again, my role is to kind of get my clients to their best state of health and really using nutrition and lifestyle habits really as medicine because they can be super powerful.
That sounds really wonderful. I know that in my experience, people often have sensitivities to various foods, even like the type of water that they're drinking can really affect the health. I mean, in an amazing way. What have you found that are some of the biggest struggles that people have with these kinds of issues?
Yeah, there's a few. So one really common one is, not even knowing that certain foods are actually triggering them. So like first step is identifying that food sensitivities are part of what's triggering symptoms. And sometimes it can be tough to identify. So that kind of leads me into number two, that oftentimes food sensitivities can have a delayed reaction. So sometimes you can't even, you don't get the full effect of a food that you're sensitive to, even sometimes around 2 to 3 weeks after ingesting the food. So it can be kind of tricky to kind of identify those if you have like the longer latency type reactions. And then number three, if someone comes in and they're reacting to like 30 different foods, it can be, of course, extremely stressful and then oftentimes very, very restrictive. So there's a lot of kind of tools that I recommend when someone does come back with a bunch of different sensitivities. And ultimately it has to do with addressing the root causes, but those are the top three that I find.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Having been in that situation myself, having multiple food sensitivities, it really can be an overwhelming kind of, place to be. I have patients who are in that kind of situation too, where, they'll tell me, everything I eat, I react to everything, and I know that it isn't always true, but, it can seem like that, they're just like, I
Mhm.
don't even know. So you really have some tools, it sounds like, to help people kind of weed through that and get to a place where they feel like they're on level ground. Is
Mhm.
that
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'll like go through a bunch of steps that I typically use a little
Yeah,
further. Mhm.
that's great. That's great. I think a lot of people would feel a lot of relief just knowing that there is kind of a plan. Do you know what
Mhm.
I mean?
Yeah, and that's really, I mean, that's the biggest thing, probably one of the biggest takeaways that anyone watching this, I want you to take away is like, there's always a reason, and we just need to determine what that is. For the most part, people should be able to reintroduce most foods that they're sensitive to at some point, maybe with the exception of like one category, which a lot of people are very sensitive to, but outside of that one food group, most things, yeah, we should always be able to add those back in.
And that is also something that I think is really eases people's mind. It's not that you have to avoid things forever, you know.
Right, right.
Um, what would you say that the biggest mistakes that people make when they have food, they even may know that they have food sensitivities, but you know, if I was just going along and I knew that, eating sugar always made my stomach hurt, like what would be the biggest mistake that I could make in just sort of knowing that?
Yeah, well, sugar is a tricky one
Well,
because
that's true. Like maybe
yeah,
something else, like almonds. Like my
yeah.
stomach always hurts when I eat almonds.
Hmm. Yeah, so I think kind of, along the same lines as what we were talking about before is like probably one of the biggest mistakes is people will either react to something like almonds or they'll get a food sensitivity test on their own or something like that. And then they'll kind of take that information and be fairly confident that like they are not to eat those foods for the rest of their life. So that's the biggest mistake. Second biggest mistake would be to like so kind of like doing it on your own, there's a lot of testing out there now where you can just order it yourself. And I
Hmm.
do always recommend being guided by a practitioner when you do get those results, because not only can it be super overwhelming, but again, people think like, okay, this means I can't ever eat any of those foods, and that's simply not true. We always need to kind of understand what's underneath those sensitivities, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then, yeah, the third mistake that I see all the time is that people will way over restrict. So they'll cut out everything. Let's say they did do a test, for example, they'll cut out everything that came back positive, and then they will stress out like crazy over it. And so this is a big problem because both of those things combined, so over restricting and then stressing out a lot, is really going to backfire, and it oftentimes does. So if you go to just eating this, 10 different foods and then you're stressed out about it and you're socially isolated, that's just going to cause you to be sensitive to those 10 foods. So again, really understanding like what the physiology is behind it with the help of a practitioner, how we can get your body back into balance so it's not so inflamed and triggered by a bunch of things is really the first step. And to really have a positive mindset about it. Ultimately, like your body's going to figure this out. yeah, you'll get to a place where you can add these things back in. Yeah, that's really important. So those are kind of the two or the three biggest things that I see most with people.
That's great. I don't know if you can just quickly talk about what is, or maybe it's outside of the scope of this interview, but what's kind of underneath lots of food sensitivities. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll kind of dive into how I approach someone with food sensitivities. And so typically, so I walk through my 7-step gut restoration protocol. And typically what that entails is first step is to investigate essentially their history. And so what I'd be looking for if someone does have food sensitivities and has identified them already is things like, what is their gut health like? What kinds of, do they have digestive symptoms? What's going on there? Do they have history of a bunch of different antibiotics? Do they have a history of some majorly stressful events, which, hello, like all of us have had a majorly stressful event over the past year plus. So things like that. Also, looking at things like hormonal balance, what's their diet been like? Are there nutrients in really good supply? Like all of those different factors can really contribute to the development of food sensitivities. So those are the things that I look at as far as like that first step of investigation. And then from there, we look into all the foundational pieces of health. So of course, getting their nutrients where we need them to be, because that can affect food sensitivities, making sure they're incorporating those stress reducers daily, especially if that's a big factor in their life, making sure they're moving well, sleeping well, they're not exposed to a bunch of toxins that's triggering their immune system. So kind of working on all those factors. And then oftentimes I'll have them maybe remove a couple common trigger foods to see if they feel better. And this, in that area, that's if people haven't done testing to identify what they are yet, but they just know that they're reacting to foods. And then from that point, if people are still getting symptoms, I might recommend identifying and addressing those triggers. So that would mean typically using specific food sensitivity testing. And then from that point, we would kind of determine whether the person is up for doing some gut microbiome testing. So trying to identify bad bugs that are hanging out in your digestive tract or potential infections that are going on. All those things can kind of contribute to food sensitivities as well. And then finally, once we kind of address those bad bugs, getting the good guys up and in good supply, and also helping to heal the gut lining. And then finally, after all that's taken care of, we want to be able to reintroduce those foods. Because, and again, most foods you want to be able to reintroduce for the most part. And then lastly, if you kind of feel good with that whole protocol, creating a game plan for how to keep your body in balance to prevent further food sensitivities in the future. So maintaining like a good balance with diet and stress reduction and movement, reducing toxin exposure and all that good stuff. So that's the process that I work through and kind of all the root causes that we would look into.
Boy, that really makes a lot of sense. I have noticed that people who are allergic or have food sensitivities or any kind of sensitivities do tend to kind of become sensitive in the future to things that maybe they weren't sensitive to in the past, or develop new allergies, which is not exactly the same as a sensitivity, but to me, they're kind of inside that same box. But really having something in place to minimize that going forward, I think is really valuable.
Yeah. And I will say, I don't want to scare anyone away from foods, but I would just say like a really good way to prevent sensitivities is to pulse out your foods. So like if you have eggs every single day, then the likelihood of your body becoming sensitive to those things is much higher.
Goes up.
Right. Yeah. So number one recommendation, if you really like something, just like cut it out for a week every few weeks. And it doesn't need to be for a month, but like maybe for a week, just take it easy on eggs or whatever the food is that you have all the time.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that really dovetails with what I've found in my work as well. So, you know, I'm just so excited that you are here as a resource for people. Where could people find information about you?
Yeah, so the best place to be my website, Christina Stapke, RDN.com. First name spelled with a CH, last name spelled STAPKE.
Mhm.
Again, and then RDN, registered dietitian nutritionist.com. Yeah, and if anyone like has questions about what you're going through, if you know you have food sensitivities or you have things like digestive issues or fatigue, brain fog, skin issues,
Mm.
headaches. Those are the common symptoms I see related to food sensitivities. We can hop on a quick call and kind of talk about, what I see might be a good path for you or some good resources.
So can you actually just go through that list that you just a little more slowly? It was like brain fog, skin
Sure.
issues.
Yeah, so the common ones I see are any kind of, I don't know if I mentioned this, but any kind of digestive issues. So bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea, heartburn,
Mhm.
any of those.
Mhm.
Also, yeah, brain fog and fatigue.
Okay, so not being able to think clearly or kind of
Mhm.
um, feeling mentally like you're either, I mean, could it include anxiety or depression,
Mhm.
those
Yeah,
kinds of
those
things?
two. Yeah, yeah. Any kind of like cognitive, neurological symptoms, absolutely. That can definitely contribute
Mhm.
or be a factor in food sensitivities. Also, yeah, a variety of different skin issues, whether it be acne or eczema or dermatitis. Those are really, really common ones.
Mhm.
Yeah, rosacea as well. And
Okay.
then, yeah, headaches are a really common one, or migraines
Oh,
as well. Mhm.
yes. Oh, and there's
Yeah,
nothing worse than a headache that just won't go. I mean, they're one of my least favorites.
yeah,
You
I
know,
know. They're
on
so tough.
a, on a scale of things that I could have, definitely leave the headaches out.
Yeah, yeah. I know. Well, and it's awesome when people can actually identify, like I've had a lot of clients that have been able to pinpoint a handful of different foods that trigger migraines, and some of them were able like get off their medications too, and it's just kind of incredible how food can make that much of a difference. So,
Yeah, yeah, I had a headache patient that I went through a process with her and kind of realized after poking at it for several weeks, we finally narrowed it down that she was getting a headache about, like you'd mentioned, like 2 or 3 days after she ate chicken, and she was eating a lot of processed cheese. So
mm,
like those two, if she ate either one of those things, and it was only during a certain season of the year, it was like during kind of like this time of year, spring, late spring, and she would eat the chicken or the cheese, and she would get a migraine like 3 days later.
mm, wow,
Um, I
yeah,
know, and just, because she was missing out on a lot. Her
hmm,
kids did sports, and she just didn't feel like doing any of it.
right, right. Well, and it's good that she was paying attention like several days after. So I'm glad you guys like walk through that, because yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes people are just kind of expecting to feel something right away if they
right.
are sensitive, but oftentimes yeah, it can take a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I mean, especially, so the elimination diet is recommended as one way of trying to identify food sensitivities. But the problem with that is a lot of typically healthy, non-allergenic foods like chicken or rice or, like broccoli or something, like not inside of those 8 allergens, basically nuts, eggs, soy, wheat, those kinds of things. A lot of people can react to like just typically pretty benign foods. So yeah, it's good to kind of just pay attention to your reactions and then potentially do testing if possible.
Right, right. Boy, Christina, that I am just so glad, because my experience has taken me this, to a certain place, but what you have to offer can really take people beyond, just simple identification of the sensitivities. So I'm just really, really happy that you're doing this work and that you're here as a resource for people.
Yeah, thanks so
Um,
much.
yeah. So let me review your website information. It's Christina Stapke, RDN. Is that correct?
Yep, that's it.
ChristinaStapke, RDN.com.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, good. Yay.
Thanks.
It always
Awesome.
feels like a little brain quiz.
Yep. The last name will get people all the time.
Right, right,
Thank you.
right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Christina. And if people have questions for you, you can contact me over here at Briggs Health, or contact Christina directly through her website. And boy, it's just been a pleasure. It's been fun.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And yeah, super excited about the program you're offering your patients.
Yeah, thanks. It just never ceases to amaze me how much of a difference this can make for people. The difference between feeling kind of good and like really good every day. It's a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And imagine how much more people could live their lives and like contribute to the world if everyone felt like that much better. Right.
Exactly, because it really is a difference between, having energy to do everything today that you want to get done today versus getting, half of what you wanted to do today done, and then kind of having to crash for the rest of the day. Whatever that is, whether it's, taking care of your family, whether it's, if you have career things that you want to work on, if you love, coaching sports, if but really having the energy to get everything done today that you want to get done versus, a third of it, half of it. I've been there.
Me too. Yeah.
And it's not fun. I have to just go and sleep for 45 minutes after I eat dinner, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh,
Right. Yeah.
there's a lot
Not
that I could
optimal.
be doing in that 45 minutes.
Yeah.
That that's better than just passing out.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. We want to take advantage of all of our day.
yes, yes. Very good, Christina. Well, you take care, and I'd love to talk to you again sometime, and we'll look forward to, continuing to collaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having me. Take
All
care.
right. Take care.